The dragon's jaws hovered over my face, and still it would not burn me. I should have been dead. Every rider in the kingdom knew the story. The king's dragon did not refuse. It did not hesitate. Men with titles, medals, bloodlines, and polished armor had climbed onto its back and come down as smoke. The training yard still carried that memory in its stones. Even after they scrubbed them, even after they poured sand over the dark marks, the smell of old ash lived there like a warning no one could silence. My knees were on that same ground. The chain around my wrists bit deeper when I moved. Someone in the crowd laughed under their breath, sharp and ugly, and more voices followed. Palace servants stood along the outer wall with their heads lowered, pretending not to stare. Court nobles did not bother pretending. They watched me the way people watched a gutter candle before it drowned in rain, waiting for the last flicker. Broken Maid. They had called me that so long it no longer sounded like an insult. It sounded like my place. Alara Wren, 24. Palace scrubber, linen mender, invisible thing with a bent past and no family name worth speaking. I had spent 6 years moving through the stronghold with my eyes on the floor and my hands busy enough to avoid trouble. But trouble had found me anyway, as it always did when powerful people needed someone smaller to carry their fear. I lifted my chin a little and looked at the beast in front of me. It was larger than any story had prepared me for. Black scales layered over muscle like forged armor. Smoke leaked between its teeth with every slow breath. One gold eye fixed on me, unblinking, ancient, almost human in its cruel intelligence. Iron restraints circled its forelegs, though they looked ornamental at best. If it decided to move, no chain in the kingdom would matter. Go on, one noble called from the viewing platform. She touched the royal seal. Let the beast judge her. I had not stolen the seal. I had found it where one of them dropped it, half hidden beneath the banquet stairs after midnight. I had picked it up because I was tired and barefoot and foolish enough to think returning it quietly might spare me notice. Instead, it brought me here. Above us, on the high stone terrace, Alistair Vale stood motionless beside the royal riders. The Alpha King did not look down often, but when he did, the entire yard changed around it. Men straightened. Nobles swallowed words they would have spoken to anyone else. Even the riders, 7 of them in dark uniforms marked by fire and claw, kept a respectful stillness in his presence. He wore no crown in the training yard. He did not need one. Power sat on him the way night sat on a forest, total, cold, unquestioned. I had seen him before only at a distance. Never this close. His face gave nothing away. Strong mouth. Hard jaw. A scar near his temple pale against bronze skin. The kind of beauty that did not invite warmth, only caution. But it was his gaze that unsettled me. It moved over the platform, over the chained dragon, over the men who had arranged this spectacle, and then stopped on me. Not with pity, with recognition so brief I nearly imagined it. Proceed, said one of the nobles, louder now, eager to perform courage from a safe height. The handler yanked the dragon's neck chain. The beast answered with a growl so deep it rattled inside my ribs. My body wanted to recoil, but there was nowhere to go. Stone at my knees, chain at my wrists. 12 nobles above, 18 servants around the walls, 7 riders near the king, every eye waiting for flame. The dragon lowered its head. Heat washed over my face. My hair stirred back from my skin. I could see each jagged tooth, each thread of smoke curling from its throat. Instinct screamed at me to beg, but something older, fiercer, rose instead. A hush fell so hard over the hall that even the chains seemed to stop breathing. I did not bow. The dragon's face filled my world, gold eyes, black scales edged in ember red, teeth long as carving knives. Heat rolled off its mouth in waves sharp enough to sting my cracked lips. Everyone had expected fire. I had expected it too. Burned flesh. Screaming. A clean end. Maybe kinder than the life I had dragged behind me through these palace corridors. Instead, the beast bent lower. Its great head dipped until the ridged bone above its eyes nearly touched the stone between my knees. Gasps broke around the hall. One noble made a strangled sound and stumbled backward into another. Silk whispered. Metal rang as one of the 7 royal riders took a step forward, hand flying to the weapon at his side. The 18 palace servants stayed frozen against the walls, but I felt their terror like cold rain. The dragon knelt. Not in threat. Not to strike. To me. Smoke leaked from its nostrils and curled around my wrists. The iron biting my skin turned warm, then hot, then suddenly soft with a sharp hiss. One chain link split apart and dropped to the floor. Then another. The sound echoed through the throne hall like a verdict. No one moved. I lifted my head slowly, because anything faster felt dangerous, unreal. My hands were free, raw, trembling. I could still hardly believe them. The beast watched me as if it had been waiting for me to understand something before anyone else did. Then I felt it. A scent cut through ash and fear. Pine smoke, winter leather, and something clean beneath it, powerful enough to change the air itself. Alpha. My pulse jumped so hard it hurt. I turned toward the throne. Alistair Vale had risen. He was not wearing a crown. He did not need one. Power held to him the way flame held to oil. Tall, still, impossible to ignore. He stood at the top of the black steps with one hand resting against the carved arm of the throne, as if he had only just decided whether the world before him was worth touching. The dragon's eyes flicked to him once, then back to me. The meaning landed like a blade sliding free. This was his dragon, the one that had burned every rider who tried to master it alive. And it had knelt before a broken maid in chains. One of the 12 court nobles found his voice first. "Your Grace," he said, too loudly, too quickly. "This is witchcraft." Another seized the word at once, eager as dogs at spilled blood. "She's cursed it. She planned this. She should be put down before the beast turns." I pushed myself upright, though my legs shook. I had been dragged into this hall as an offering to prove what everyone already believed, that I was expendable. Now they wanted to turn wonder into accusation before it became truth. That, at least, I understood. Alistair Vale descended one step. Only one. The room went silent again. "No one," he said, "will speak another word unless I permit it." His voice was low, but it hit harder than shouting ever could. A command did not travel from him. It settled. It locked into bone. The nobles dropped their eyes. Even the riders held still. I should have been relieved. Instead, my chest tightened. Protection from a king was not safety. Not yet. It could become a cage by the next breath. The dragon shifted and lowered one wing, shielding half my body from the court. I stared at the enormous arc of black membrane and smoking scale, stunned by the strange tenderness of it. Alistair Vale came down the rest of the steps. Each footfall struck the hall like a measured warning. He stopped only a few feet from me, close enough that his scent deepened, close enough that I could see the pale scar near his jaw and the exhaustion hidden beneath his control. He looked at my wrists first. Not my face, not the dragon. My wrists. The skin around my wrists throbbed where the iron had bitten too deep. Fresh bruises were already rising beneath the soot, ugly blue shadows under ash and heat. Alistair Vale's gaze rested there for one long beat, and something unreadable tightened in his face. Then the first of the royal riders broke rank. "My king," one of the 7 said, stepping forward with a gauntlet hand already lifted toward the chain at my arms. His voice carried the polished confidence of a man used to being obeyed. "Allow me. The beast is agitated because she still stands within its reach." The dragon answered before Alistair Vale could. The sound did not begin as a roar. It began lower than that, deep in the stone beneath my boots, a grinding tremor that ran through the hall and up my bones. Heat surged across my face. The dragon's wings flared wider, black membrane stretching so suddenly that candles guttered out along the walls. Smoke poured from between its teeth. The rider froze. Every person in the hall knew the stories. Every rider who had tried to force command onto this creature had died screaming, burned alive inside steel and leather while the court watched, and called it tragedy when it was really arrogance meeting judgment. But pride has always been deaf. The rider reached anyway. "Stand down," Alistair Vale said. Too late. The dragon lunged just enough to make the whole room stumble backward in a single wave. Fire did not leave its mouth, not fully, but a hard burst of white heat blasted past the rider's shoulder and struck the stone column behind him. The marble blackened at once. Molten cracks spidered down its carved face. The rider hit the floor, scrambling, one sleeve smoking. Gasps tore through the 12 court nobles. The 18 palace servants shrank against the walls like pale birds in a storm. Even the other 6 royal riders shifted, hands moving toward weapons they knew would be useless. This was not the terror of a chained girl before a beast. This was a struggle for control. And for the first time, I understood that I was not the center of the danger. The dragon's eyes were fixed on the riders. Not hungry, not wild. Warning. Alistair Vale moved first this time, stepping between the fallen rider and the dragon with a calm that looked almost cruel. He did not draw a blade. He did not raise his voice. Yet the room bent around him all the same. No one touches her, he said. Her. Not prisoner. Not servant. Not mistake. The rider pushed himself up, humiliated, smoke curling from his sleeve. My king, with respect, it is choosing weakness over rule. Let us break it before the rebels force our hand. That word struck the air harder than the dragon's heat. Rebels. So the rumors threading through kitchens and servant stairwells were true enough to reach the throne room openly now. Pressure was closing in from beyond the capital, and these men wanted obedience from the dragon more than they wanted understanding. Fast control. Public control. Something brutal and simple they could parade before fear. The dragon lowered its head. At first I thought it meant to strike again. Then I saw it. The smallest motion, one I would have missed if I had not spent years reading danger in hands, in breath, in the twitch of a jaw before a slap. Its gaze dropped to my wrists. Its nostrils flared once. A thin line of sound left its throat, almost too soft to hear beneath the panic in the hall. Not a growl. Not rage. A note. Broken, rough, and low, like grief forced through fire. Memory moved through me so sharply it hurt. Not from court. Not from this palace. From the far edge of the lower orchard when I was 11, before my father's debts sold my labor, and before kindness became something I stopped expecting. A wild hound had been caught in a snare of twisted wire. Everyone else heard snarling. I heard the pain between the sounds. Pain had a sound, if a person listened long enough. That was what came back to me when the dragon's cry faded into the dark rafters above the lower vaults. Not fury, not hunger. Hurt. Raw and old and buried under too much fire. I stood very still with my burned palms open at my sides while the torchlight shook across black scales and chains thicker than my arm. Around me, the air smelled of coal, old blood, and scorched stone. No one else in that chamber had heard what I heard. By dawn, all of them knew something had happened anyway. Word moved through the stronghold faster than smoke. A maid had touched the beast and lived. A broken servant had stood near its jaws and kept breathing. By mid-morning, the whispers had turned cruel again, because that was easier for the court than wonder. The 12 court nobles gathered above the arena in their carved stone gallery, dressed in silk and contempt, eager to turn rumor into spectacle. Below them, the 18 palace servants pressed themselves into the edges of the lower stands, trying not to be seen while watching everything. The 7 royal riders stood near the iron gates in black armor, rigid as spear points. I counted them because counting steadied me. I was brought in through the west arch with my wrists wrapped in fresh linen. Not kindness. Just enough cloth to keep blood from staining the sand before the entertainment began. The arena floor had been raked smooth. Burn marks blackened half the ring. Old proof of what happened to riders who thought leather and command gave them mastery over pain. Iron posts circled the pit. Chains ran from the center like spokes. One of the court nobles leaned over the rail. If it does not burn her, he called, then let her prove she is useful. A few others laughed. I kept my eyes on the gate. I had not been summoned to prove courage. I knew that. This was punishment dressed as inquiry. If I ran, they would call it guilt. If I begged, they would call it deceit. If I died, they would call it order restored. Footsteps sounded behind me, measured and heavy. I did not turn at once, but I knew the shape of that presence now. Alistair Vale stopped close enough that I could feel the heat of him through the chill of the arena air. Look at me, he said. I did. His face gave nothing away to the gallery. Cold king. Controlled king. But his eyes were fixed on the bandages at my wrists, then on the gate ahead. When it enters, you may step back. May. Not must. A choice then. Small but real. If I step back, I said quietly, they will learn nothing. A flicker passed through his expression. Not approval exactly. Recognition. From the gallery, one of the 12 court nobles called down, begin. The gate chains rattled. Every sound in the arena narrowed to metal dragged over stone. Then the dragon came through. It did not rush at first. It emerged like something pulled out of night itself, massive shoulders rolling under black scales that caught red in the light. Smoke threaded from between its teeth. Its wings stayed half-folded, too large for the ring, their edges scarred in pale ridges like old lightning strikes. The beast lowered its head, and the heat of its breath touched my face from 20 feet away. The crowd recoiled as one. I did not. Fear was there. It would have been madness if it were not. My knees wanted to weaken. My skin remembered flame. But beneath the fear, that same note trembled again in the dragon's throat. Grief forced through fire. Not rage. Warning. I looked lower. The answer was not in its teeth. Not in its eyes. It was in the iron. A collar of dark metal bit deep around the base of its neck, fitted with inward hooks hidden beneath the scales. Every time it moved, the spikes drove deeper. The metal explained the pain better than the fire ever had. I could see now why the dragon had twisted against its own strength, why each breath came sharp and furious, why the sound in its throat had not been hunger but torment. The collar was forged to punish movement itself. Dark iron sat buried beneath overlapping scales, and at every shift of that enormous neck, the hidden hooks bit deeper. Whoever had made it had known exactly where to wound without killing. My hand lifted before fear could stop it. A voice cracked through the vault behind me. Step away from the beast. I turned so fast my shoulder struck stone. 3 of the palace servants stood at the entrance to the lower chamber, white-faced, their lantern light shaking over the walls. Behind them came 2 of the court nobles in heavy winter cloaks, and with them one of the royal riders, still marked by soot along his gloves. No one looked at me first. They looked at the dragon. Then they looked at my hand, still half raised toward the collar, and all at once their fear found a shape it could blame. She touched it, one noble said. The words landed like a sentence. I knew that tone. I had lived under it my whole life. It was the voice people used when they wanted guilt to become truth by saying it in a room full of witnesses. It was already chained, I said. Look at the iron. But the noble did not step closer. He did not want truth. He wanted distance. Why were you here alone? The question was a trap because the honest answer sounded impossible. Because Alistair Vale had brought me here with his trust and his silence. Because a broken maid standing inside a dragon vault after midnight was already a scandal before she opened her mouth. One of the servants crossed himself under his breath. Another stared at my wrists as though expecting blood to appear there. Then the dragon moved. The chain along the far wall snapped taut with a sound like a bell struck underwater. Flame did not come. Instead, its great head lowered an inch, then another, until one burning eye fixed on the men behind me. A warning. Nothing more. But that was enough. The royal rider stepped back and reached for the horn at his belt. No, I said too quickly. That was all it took. The noble's expression sharpened with sudden victory. There. You hear her? She is protecting it. The rider lifted the horn anyway. I did not think. I grabbed his wrist before he could sound it. For one stunned second the whole vault froze. A maid did not lay hands on the king's cavalry. A maid did not interrupt alarm in the stronghold. A maid did not choose action over obedience. His face hardened at once. Let go. If you call the whole keep down here, someone will kill it before they see the collar. The words came out raw, but true. In the stillness that followed, even the servants looked back at the dragon's neck. The noble did not. Seize her. The command was not law. But fear makes cowards brave in groups. The rider tore free. One servant caught my arm. Another reached for my shoulder. I twisted away, not to escape them, but to put myself between them and the dragon's head as it drew back again in mounting pain. If they rushed it now, the vault would become a slaughterhouse. Look at the iron. I shouted. This time someone did. The youngest servant lifted his lantern higher. Light slid across scale, chain, and then the black ring buried at the throat. I watched understanding hit him first, then horror. There's something under the neck, he whispered. The rider swore and took a step forward, slower now. The noble caught his sleeve. Don't be a fool. This is sabotage. It should have sounded absurd. Instead it sounded useful. Sabotage changed the room faster than blood ever could. The noble who said it did not raise his voice, but he did not need to. Fear moved through the stable in a colder way than panic. Panic made people loud. Fear made them choose sides. I saw it happen in the space of one breath. The rider who had barked at me stopped looking at the dragon and started looking at everyone else. The youngest servant lowered his lantern a little, as if light itself had become dangerous. The black ring buried beneath the dragon's throat gleamed again when it shifted, and the sound that tore out of its chest was no longer wild to me. It was pain with teeth around it. I straightened too quickly, and pain shot up my bad leg hard enough to blur the edges of the room. I caught myself on the wooden rail and tasted copper where I'd bitten the inside of my cheek. No one moved to help me. They were all watching the ring now. Who would dare put iron on a royal beast? One of the riders asked. The noble answered before anyone else could. Someone who wanted the crown humiliated in front of the entire court. That was the first lie. I knew it the moment I heard it. Not because I understood court games, but because I understood cruelty. This had not been done for spectacle alone. Iron had been worked into the flesh with patience, hidden where scales and shadow would cover it, left there long enough to turn agony into rage. Someone had wanted the dragon blamed for its own suffering. Footsteps struck stone behind me, measured and unmistakable. The stable fell silent so fast it felt like a hand over the mouth of the whole room. Alistair Vale came in without a cloak, as if he had walked straight out of command and into judgment. The riders bowed at once. The servants bent lower. The nobles did not bow deeply enough. His gaze passed over them and landed on the dragon first, then on the ring, then on me, still braced against the rail, breathing through the pain in my leg. What happened? He asked. The noble stepped forward. Your Majesty. The maid interfered while the beast was in a frenzy. We then discovered evidence of tampering. It may be part of a larger plot. The way he said maid made it sound like filth under a boot. Alistair Vale did not look at him. Did you touch the iron? He asked me. Yes. With what? My hands. A rider sucked in a breath. A servant crossed himself. Iron should have sickened me worse than that. It should have dropped me to the floor. I knew that because it always had. Even scraps left in wash water could make my skin welt. But the pain tonight had not come from the iron alone. It had come from the dragon. I looked from the ring to Alistair Vale and understood something I had not wanted to name. It hurt because it was hurting. The silence after that was different. Not disbelief. Recognition. One of the older riders turned sharply toward me. What did you say? I kept my eyes on the king. When it pulled against the chain, I felt it before I saw it. When it tried to breathe, it burned here. I touched my own throat. Not like fear. Like metal under skin. The noble gave a short, brittle laugh. A convenient claim. Alistair Vale finally looked at him, and the noble went quiet. The king crossed the stable in 3 strides and stopped close enough that I could see the strain at the corners of his eyes. He was tired, more tired than a king was ever supposed to appear, and for one strange second, he looked less dangerous than burdened. Who taught you to read a dragon's pain? He asked. No one. Then how did you know where to look? Because pain recognized pain. Because pain recognized pain. The words never left my mouth, but something in my face must have answered for me. The stable had gone so still that I could hear the dragon's breath scraping through its teeth, hot and uneven, and the soft shift of hooves from the frightened horses in the next row. Alistair Vale held my gaze for one heartbeat longer, then turned toward the open archway as if he had heard something the rest of us had not. A horn cut through the night. Not the ceremonial kind. Not the long, silver note that welcomed riders home. This one came in sharp bursts from the outer wall. Attack. Every person in the stable changed at once. The palace servants froze first, then scattered. One of the royal riders swore and ran for the yard. The noble who had mocked me backed away so fast he nearly struck a post. Outside, boots hammered over stone, and another horn answered from farther down in the capital. Then another. Too many. Too close. The south gate, one rider shouted from the archway. Fire in the lower market. The rebel commanders breached the outer district. The air inside me went cold. Alistair Vale did not move like a man surprised. He moved like a man meeting the shape of something he had expected and hated. How many? Too many to hold in the streets without burning half the district. That mattered because of the dragon. Everyone in the capital knew what happened when the king's beast was loosed over a crowd. It did not sort innocence from guilt. It judged threat the way fire judged dry timber. If the rebels had forced their way into the packed market roads, sending the dragon above them would stop the uprising and slaughter the city with it. The dragon lifted its scarred head then, and I felt the change before anyone else did. The great body had been restless all evening, pain traveling through muscle like lightning trapped under skin. Now the restlessness sharpened. Its eyes fixed on the open dark beyond the stable. On the city. On blood. On fear. A weapon waking. One of the royal riders reached for the saddle rack. "We can still mount him." The stable master actually flinched. "No," I said. Too loud. Too fast. Every face turned toward me, and shame rose hot in my throat out of pure habit. A maid did not interrupt riders. A broken maid interrupted no one. But the dragon had already spread one wing half open, and I saw the old strain seize along the ruined tendon near the shoulder. "If anyone forces him into the air like this," I said, "he won't stop at the rebels. He's in pain, and he's frightened. You won't be riding a beast. You'll be hanging from a storm." The rider stared at me as if I had slapped him. "The city burns while we debate a servant's feelings?" One of the nobles snapped from behind us. Alistair Vale turned only his head. "Say one more useless thing." Silence. Another horn blast shook through the stone. Somewhere beyond the courtyard, people were screaming now. Not close enough to see. Close enough to imagine. The rider swallowed. "Then what do you want us to do, Your Majesty? If we do not take the dragon, the rebels reach the palace." I should have stepped back then. I should have let kings and soldiers decide how many strangers could be sacrificed to save a throne. That was the old lesson, the one beaten into me by years of lowered eyes and swallowed words. Survive by becoming smaller. Instead, I looked at the dragon's trembling wing, at the chain scars under its throat, at the intelligence in those furious eyes, and I understood something all at once. It was not looking for commands. It was looking for permission. "Open the stable," I said. The rider let out a short, unbelieving laugh. "You want it loose?" "I want him to choose." That landed harder than shouting would have. "Him, not it." The bolt screamed as it came free. For one suspended second, nothing moved. Torchlight shook across black scales, over the iron ring fixed to the stable floor, over the raw grooves cut deep beneath the dragon's throat. Every rider in the aisle went still with the kind of fear that had been taught into bone. The royal riders had all seen what happened when a hand slipped, when a command came too sharp, when pride mistook itself for mastery. Fire. Flesh. Screams that never fully left these walls. I felt all of them waiting for me to be wrong. Then the dragon lifted his head, not toward the open stable doors, toward me. His breath hit my face in a wave of heat and ash. My bad leg nearly gave under me, but I did not step back. I kept my palm open, low, empty. No rope. No bit. No lie. "Your Grace," one of the riders said behind me, voice thin now, not hard. "This is madness." Alistair Vale did not answer at once. I could feel him at my shoulder, the force of him held taut, every instinct in him built to command, to protect, to end danger before it chose a shape. But he had asked me how I knew where to look, and now he was living inside the answer. The dragon turned from me only when a horn split the night. One blast. Then another. Not ceremonial. Not distant. The courtyard erupted. Boots pounded over stone. Somewhere above us, glass shattered. A servant screamed. The sound sliced through the stable like a knife, and every horse in the lower stalls reared against their tethers. The dragon's pupils flared wide. Fire gathered behind his teeth, hot enough that the air changed. The south gate. A rider shouted, rushing in from the outer arch, blood running from his temple. "They're inside." Rebel banners at the lower yard. So this was how it came, not in whispers, not in council chambers, but with steel in the dark. Alistair Vale moved first. "Get the palace servants to the inner keep. Seal the west passage." His voice cracked through panic cleanly enough to make men remember themselves. 2 riders with me. The rest hold the lower court. He reached for the chain by reflex. The dragon recoiled so violently that iron shrieked against stone. Fire spilled between his teeth, scorching the post beside my head. A rider yanked me backward just as sparks exploded over the straw. "Leave him," I said, twisting free. Alistair Vale's eyes cut to mine, bright and hard. "If he breaks in that yard, more than rebels die. If you drag him there in chains, he will." Another horn. Closer. The choice hit his face before it hit his mouth. King. Alpha. Man. Every piece of him had been trained to believe control was survival. And now the palace was under attack, while the one creature powerful enough to turn the tide stood shaking with old terror and fresh rage. "You asked for choice," Alistair Vale said. Then he took his hand off the chain. The dragon did not bolt. He lowered his head once, almost sharply, as if listening to something beneath the shouting, beneath the clamor of weapons and orders and fear. Then his gaze fixed on the far wall of the stable, the old stone section near the grain room, half hidden by tack and shadow. I knew before anyone else moved. There, I said. One of the riders slammed the wall panel aside. A narrow service passage gaped behind it, and men in rebel colors poured through the opening with blades drawn. 5 at the front, armed and deliberate. Not soldiers in chaos, but commanders who had come knowing exactly where to cut. Behind them surged more bodies, enough to flood the aisle. They had not breached the palace. They had been let in. The first commander lunged for Alistair Vale. I snatched a fallen rake handle off the ground and drove it crosswise into his knees. He crashed sideways into a stall door hard enough to splinter wood. Not strength. Timing. The commander I had dropped slammed into the stall door, and the crack of wood split through the stable like a warning bell. For one breath, everyone turned. That was all the opening the dragon needed. It moved out of the smoke and shadows with a sound I felt in my ribs before I understood it. A low, rolling growl, ancient and furious. Its scales caught the lantern light in dark red flashes, like embers under iron. I had seen that creature from far-off courtyards and high tower windows. I had seen the blackened training field where men had tried to ride it and died screaming. I had heard the servants whisper that it bowed to no hand and spared no one. Now it was loose inside the stable, and 5 rebel commanders who had come to murder a king suddenly remembered fear. One of them shouted to bring it down. A blade flashed. A crossbow snapped. The bolt never reached its target. Alistair Vale caught the shooter by the wrist, twisted hard, and drove him face first into a stone pillar. Bone cracked. Another commander came in low with a curved knife, but Alistair was already bleeding and already angry, and there was something terrifying about the precision of him now. He did not fight like a cornered man. He fought like someone who had finally been given the one thing he had denied himself: permission. I grabbed a hanging chain from the tack wall and swung it at the third commander as he raised his sword behind Alistair. The links wrapped his forearm. I yanked with both hands and felt my shoulder nearly tear. He cursed, stumbled, and Alistair drove his elbow into the man's throat. The stable exploded into motion. Horses screamed in their stalls. Firelight shuddered. Outside, steel rang against steel where the 7 royal riders met the flood of rebels in the courtyard. I heard boots, shouting, the wet sound of bodies hitting mud. Somewhere beyond that, the palace bells had begun to toll. But inside that stable, everything narrowed to 3 things: the king, the dragon, and me. The last 2 rebel commanders must have understood it too, because they stopped trying to kill the beast and aimed for me instead. Of course they did. I was the weak place. The servant. The broken maid with one old limp and soot on her hands. The woman nobody had looked at twice until tonight. One of them lunged. I had no time to run. Then the dragon turned its head. Its eyes found mine. Not wild. Not blind. Knowing. The commander took one more step toward me, and the beast roared so hard the lanterns swung from their hooks. Heat slammed across my face. The air changed. The commander froze in pure animal terror. Then fire burst past me in a controlled, searing line, so close I felt my skin sting, so precise it never touched my dress. It swallowed the man whole. His scream ended almost instantly. The last commander dropped his weapon and tried to flee. Alistair caught him by the collar and threw him to the ground. "Who let you in?" he said, with one knee on the man's spine. The commander laughed through blood. "Your court opened the gate before we ever touched it." That answer landed like another blade. Treason. Not rumor. Not suspicion. Truth. The 12 court nobles had spent years feeding on fear, on distance, on the belief that power belonged only to those born high enough to touch it. And I understood, all at once, why they had hated me the moment Alistair began to see me clearly. A broken maid in the king's confidence was more dangerous to them than any rebel army. They had not betrayed only him. They had betrayed the kingdom to preserve a shape of it that served them. Alistair rose slowly. Blood ran down one sleeve. His breathing was rough. "Bring the nobles," he called toward the courtyard, and his voice carried like iron through the chaos. "Alive." The royal riders answered at once. The commander beneath his hand spat at the straw.